So what I do with every insider is that the first question is, what was your, because everybody's path into the industry is different. So what was your path in? How did you get it?
Wow, okay, let's see. I came out of UCLA and was working in rock and roll. I worked for Bill Graham in San Francisco, who was a famous rock and roll promoter, those of you of my age would know. And about 2 weeks into the job, I'd been working in rock and roll for a long time, and I just looked around and realized I couldn't keep doing this. It was just too sad with all of these people that were they were all like 16-year-olds that had turned 40, and I loved the music. It was just the industry of promoting it. So from there I went to work in television news, and went on to try and make a career in television in San Francisco. And then one day decided I wanted to get in the movie business. And so I wrote a script and sent it down here, and it was purchased by a company named Frank Price. He was a producer.
Wait, the first script you wrote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's the best part. So, I mean, they optioned it for like a nickel. And I got on an airplane, I sold everything, I quit my job, I moved down here, and I thought we'd be in production in like 3 weeks.
Right.
That's how it works. So
Right.
it was. I don't think I ever heard from them. I don't think we were going to have a meeting. So I started working. I realized I had the money they paid me, and I had no job. So I started just trying to hit the streets, looking for a way to. I didn't want to be a writer. Actually, I'd written a script to try and come down here to get another job to be a producer, and so I made a deal at that point. It's a long, sort of Shaggy Dog story. To write Amityville 5 and Amityville 6 if I could produce them. And I found the Republic Pictures, they agreed to it. So my first 2 real credits were Amityville 5 and Amityville 6, which is pretty twisted movies. And
How old were you?
I was in my late 20s, mid-20s.
So what, you said, you went to them and said, we should do an Amityville 5 and 6. I'll write them.
A guy I knew had bought a book. This is like, these stories are like, they're not that great, but I'll tell you. A guy I knew had bought a book called The Amityville Garage Sale, literally. Some hack had written a book that had, someone had a garage sale and all the items were sold from Amityville, and he was going to make 10 movies, right, based on a garage sale. And I read about this and I thought, this is just a terrible idea. No one's going to write these, so I could. So,
I'm no one?
Yeah, I played the no one card pretty well. But really at the core of it, probably the core of what I stumbled upon is that when I was working in television way back in my early 20s, TV news used to be shot on film, if you can imagine that. And when I got there, they had just turned over to videotape. And so this is this crazy thing, this videotape thing. So I learned about it as part of working in television. And when I moved down here, trying to find a job, trying to get the job right in Amityville, there was companies that were just starting to use videotape editing in television movies. And so I had this secret knowledge. I knew how to do it. So part of the thing I was trading on was, I can help you with that part if you'll help me, give me the job to write and produce. I mean, it sounds like the Wild West, but it really was at that time. All of my friends, you were either going to get a job in pornography or horror films, and I chose horror films. And but that technology ticket actually was important in my career. So just to be fair, I'm running around in my 20s, Los Angeles, trying to write horror films, trying to parlay that in producers, but all the while having a grasp of the emerging technology at the time, which had to do with electronic editing. I didn't realize, I didn't go out to do that, but that knowledge kept getting me into the room with people. Eventually it got me into producing a movie for Universal called Tremors 2, and then when I was there doing that movie, I got an invitation to go over and work with Warner Brothers. They were looking for an executive that had knowledge of video technology at the time. I'm like, sure, I can do that too. That eventually got me into producing for Warner Brothers, and I had many years are passing now. We're going really quickly. And I had a couple movies. I was fortunate enough to work on work around some of the Harry Potter movies, and then probably the biggest movie I worked on was. I found myself alone with the director, Alfonso Cuarón, trying to figure out a movie called Gravity. So we made that movie, a couple other movies after that. And at the end, this long story of technology and storytelling, converging with opportunity and being trying to be clever and smart about it, led me into an opportunity at Dreamworks about 2 years ago when they were looking to find a new head of the company. And the tool set that I've been using to make movies like Gravity and Fury Road and those was very similar to the tool set that we've been used to make animation. And those words were collapsing. I took advantage of it and it was that opportunity.
So because you were at Warner Brothers, like you were the logistics guy, right? You were the how to get things done kind of.
It's how to make things done.
I
think that's fair. Yeah, I think I ended up there producing technologically difficult movies with often really difficult directors.
so just explain that, and then we'll move on. But like Warner Brothers would do a deal with a director for a script, and then they'd say, "Great, how the fuck do we make this?" And let's call Chris. Is that sort of how it works, or are you involved in the decision? I mean, were you involved in the?
No, I was rarely asked ahead of time whether we should do this. So the Gravity story was I got a call from the president of the studio who said, "Hey, Alfonso Cuarón's going to call you," and I worked with him on Harry Potter, and I said, "He's going to call you. He's got this crazy idea for Gravity, and can you just read it and let us know what you think?" So and I'll send the script over. So the script arrives at my desk, and I got nothing to do with it. I read the first 5 pages and the phone rings, and it's Alfonso. And he goes, "So what do you think?" I go, "I don't know. I've read 5 pages, and it seems unproducible." And he goes, "I know, it's absolutely unproducible. The deal at the time was." He goes, "But if you had to do it, what would you do?" And I go, seriously, I have no idea, except that I might do this. I might suggest you make an entirely animated movie, literally in CG and photorealistic CGI, and then we'll backwards engineer and put the faces inside the helmets." And he said, "I'm coming over to see you." So he drove over, and this is now I'm like 40 minutes into Gravity, right? And I'm at page 35, and he shows up and he goes, "All right, tell me what you said again." I go, "Okay," and he goes, "Okay, come with me." So we leave my office and we go across a lot of Warner Brothers upstairs where there's a meeting that has been convened with all the heads of the studio, and this is a meeting that Alfonso was coming to go to, and he drags me and he goes, tell them what you told me. And so I go, "Well, you can sort of do this." And so then they turn to me and they go, "That's fantastic. How much will it cost?" And now I've read 37 pages of the script. I've been with the project about 50 minutes, and I go, "75 million?" I go, "All right, so let's do this." And so that's and I it sounds funny, but man, that's very close to exactly how it happened. Somewhere over that movie, somewhere over the Atlantic, I was flying back from London, and it occurred to me that in all of that pitch I had done, and we had now spent some time trying to research and figure out ways to make this movie and kind of pursue what I had laid out, I realized that there was a really missing piece, and I won't get too complicated into it, but there was no way for us to replicate the lighting that we had established in the pre-visualization onto the photography. There was no way to run that direction. You always go the other direction. And so I'm literally like going, "Oh shit, someone's going to figure this out." And when they do, I'm dead, because this is like, it simply doesn't work. And weirdly and almost, out of sort of magic, I was reading Popular Science magazine was like left on the plane, and there was a small clip about a guy in San Francisco that had taken automobile assembly plant robots and was training them to hold cameras for newsrooms, so that he could have these old robots doing newsroom photography instead of hiring people to just stand there with the cameras. And so I got back, I called him and I said, "Is there any way that you could teach those robots to read animation code?" And he goes, "Sure, yeah, it's just a Linux-based Maya code." And so that went all the way around to where when we shot the movie, we had a room full of animatronic robots that were carrying lights and cameras, and thus lighting the objects in the way that we had lit them when we had lit them in the computer ahead of time. So long enough to get there.
So how do you? I mean, you began with like, okay, I know about videotape, and no one knows about that. And now you're into sort of this level. So did you have a kind of as you were working your job, did you have a side where you're like reading everything? I mean, keeping up. I mean, how do you keep up with? How do you stay ahead of the curve? What were you doing?
And that into technology?
Yeah.
I think the more interesting question is a lot of people know that. Why did it work out? Why was I able to make it work? And it really comes from many of the things we're talking about in the room here today, which is that all of that, I can tell you technology stories forever. I can tell you about being in Namibia, Africa with George Miller, seriously wondering whether we were ever going to get out, those sorts of things. And they're all fun movie stories, but what drives any of this is, and it sounds cornball to say it, but you have to know story. And you have to be able to sit in a room and look at a powerful tool, whether it's an automobile assembly plant robot or anything that we've dealt with here, and know how is this going to change how the storyteller uses it and how the story is rendered. And that's that's the skill set. So, I mean, that's what you're working on in this room here. That's the separating factor.
All right, well, so let's move to the writing and story and stuff and your new job. 2 years. I imagine you see a lot of scripts and stories and pictures and all of that in your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
What part of the reason why you're here today is what are you seeing, and what advice do you have for people doing that to you and who hope to get a script or something in front of someone like you?
I think you can answer the question a variety of ways, but the two that I would focus on, and I'd almost poll the room, which is to say, do you want to answer that question from inside drama, from inside storytelling? What are changes in stories? How are audiences changing? Or do you want to go from the outside, which is really the marketplace and what's really selling and moving? And you look at the numbers, because they do meet somewhere in the middle, and that's the movie often.
Okay. Well, I'm voting for a bit of both, but do you guys want one or the other?
All right, I'll try a bit of that.
Yeah, try me both.
I think one of the things we're seeing there's a number of factors that you have to keep track of. I'm going to come from the business side inward. You have to be cognizant of changing audience habits. You have to be cognizant of a multi-platform environment that we're existing in. Everybody knows that. Right now the business is still keyed off of the theatrical film as the most powerful way to launch an IP. But then the waterfall that we used to always depend on, that is to say that when you establish something in a theatrical release, it then becomes a TV show, or it becomes home video, or it becomes that little waterfall. That's been utterly disruptive, thanks to many things, Netflix among them, of course. And without that waterfall now, I think IP can establish itself, intellectual property, in stories and characters, in our consciousness through any variety of platforms. And any of you who are aspiring out here to write or act for any of this, I wouldn't pursue the feature film. I would pursue all of the other platforms which provide much greater opportunity right now. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to keep track of. Match that on the other direction by the fact that all of those other platforms have much less rigorous rules and much less formal styles. And I think both the things we saw today, or listened to today, could have really fantastic lives of course in feature films, but they don't have to be there. The outrageous body comedy that we just watched here, I mean, there's a million places for ways for an audience to experience that. Millions overstated. There are several really great platforms out there that an audience could experience that in, and I would be looking at doing that. Whether it's you could perform that as a play that becomes a set of clipped YouTube shorts that make their way out, and ultimately are packaged together in some sort of a Netflix, a premiere. I would be really mindful of that, because the formality of our business is breaking down in terms of distribution and financing, and really then you come the other direction of audience habits and what's happened to our audience. I think our audiences become more fractured, they become more niche, they've become smarter. They get, you guys were asking about some of the questions raised today were about whether the storytelling was moving too quickly. I would find it's moving too slowly. I think audiences right now have any of you guys watched, I'll tell you what was crazy, I watched Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid about 2 months ago. One of the great movies I loved when I was a kid, and it's really slow. It's not bad, it just takes a long time for things to happen, and beautifully done and artfully presented, but audiences are moving at a mile a minute here. In terms of bankable, and I'm in this business right now, family entertainment remains probably the most important genre right now in entertainment. It's probably the only genre that's really driving the traditional model big, and I'm including in family entertainment the lower end of superhero movies. The Ant-Mans in that area, those are really to replace what used to be probably animated movies for kids. So the family space is a really robust place to work in as well.
Why are you so down on features?
I'm not down on features. I make.
I know. Well, that's right. when you suggest that we those. By the way, I liken most of the people aspiring writers to be like the zombies outside of the wall, and we're trying to climb up, and get in. So are you saying writing a spec feature is really is not a path that we should be looking at?
No, it is a path. There's just other ones which are more accessible and possibly more interesting. I think the feature film business, which I owe a lot of my life to, is undergoing a lot of change, under a lot of pressure right now. And the response is something that I think you read a lot of criticisms. For the most part, we're seeing a lot of lean into franchise superhero movies. The adult drama seems to have migrated to TV, streaming television. I don't think that's going to change. I think that the feature film business is going to transform more and more toward, start to blend into what we would call location-based entertainment. We see that trend already with beautiful enhanced theater experiences, more expensive tickets. That's not to say one shouldn't write feature films. They're fantastic. We need them written. I need them written. Just that I would, in giving advice, if I should be so bold, it would be to say there's just other platforms which present greater opportunities for more access.
What about from a story point of view? Because I know we were talking just before about I know I'm reading a lot of scripts probably at a different level of polish than you're reading.
I'm not sure that's true.
And I hope that's the case, actually. But what I notice in a lot of the scripts I'm reading is there's a real emphasis on story at the expense of characters.
Oh, I think that's the case. You're going to run into that all the time here. Stories. So the criteria that we try to use, we spend a lot of time. We have obviously evaluate a lot of scripts. For two reasons, I would say two things are really the most important thing for you. Those are going to be the world of the movie and the characters. Story is important. Story is kind of third for us. Plot. In the end, of course you can't have a bad story, but for the purposes of family entertainment, for the purposes of feature films, the world of the movie, the universe of the movie, the incredible, whether how engaging it looks, how aspirational it is, but also the inherent conflict and drama that might be baked into the world of a movie is really important. And that's a long way of explaining the superhero genre, right? You have a universe where there's any number of conflicts and stories can take place, but the magic and wonder and spectacle of the universe remains. I think world creation is really a critical part of mainstream movie making right now. And then really memorable characters. For us at DreamWorks, our characters are often imperfect characters with outside dreams, and we like to watch them pursue them. That seems to work really well for us.
It's not like Kung Fu Panda.
It could be Kung Fu Panda, it could be Shrek, it could be any of those. But I think that I would just the short answer to your question is we certainly respond more to stories that are driven by character choices. The plot really functions to provide the characters an opportunity to make choices which tell us about who they are. And every time that's working, scripts really work for us.
When you're reading a script, are there things, do you have pet peeves? Like as you're reading a script, you sit down to read, and after like page 2, you're like, oh, you've made that mistake, there's a red flag that's gone up, or there's something.
I do, but I don't know that they're universal outside of myself. I don't like movies that declare up front that the character's broken, and now we're going to we're going to fix them with the movie. I think we've moved past that. I think that, and perhaps maybe this is more of a family entertainment thing, but I'm more interested in stories where characters seem imperfect, and over the course of the movie, they learn to value themselves, and they learn to identify what makes them strong and powerful. That's a pet peeve. So when I read suddenly that someone starts out a movie in a place, and we know that they're going to have to be fixed, I tend to disengage a bit.
So you get drawn into scripts principally by character. I mean, I know world as well, but versus
world and character.
Plot, right? World and character.
Yeah.
So, are there any traits in characters? I mean, are there cliches? Are there things that writers should avoid that are overwritten or overdone that you're like, oh, another one of these, or is it?
Another one of these are characters that.
Apart from broken.
With a broken one. Characters that are too soon, too quickly self-conscious of what makes them appealing. It's characters that are, in the worst case on this side, it's the characters that will wink at the audience, break the fourth wall, and tell them they know what's going on. Yeah. Characters that position themselves as smarter than the audience are fun to watch only when they fall, right, and trip over themselves. So those characters I think have gotten a little overused a bit. Freshest characters for me right now, and I'll kind of restate what I said a minute ago, is characters who are absolutely not perfect, right? And you might even call them broken, but they're okay with it. And they're going to find a way to make what they are valuable and have other people value them for it.
Okay. So they're sort of self-aware, kind of, or just more comfortable in their own skin, even though that skin is imperfect.
I think you do. I think they're interesting characters to do both. Right. Some that are just completely aware of what it is, and others who just struggle to not understand why they're not connecting with the rest of the world. But when they do, they realize they're unique and they're different. They're going to lean into it.
Are you seeing a trend in storytelling at the moment? Are there shift changes, or are you reading a lot of particular things, or something going on?
No, I mean, there's just the stuff that you guys watch. I mean, there's a lot of, Washington's provided us with a lot of great absurdist drama that we can all lean into, and I enjoy reading those.
Well, I'm reading a lot of dystopian futures, and I'm wondering if that's a response to that. Like, there's just a lot of very sad, angry writers out there at the moment who are.
I think I'm looking for the optimistic ones. I'm
yeah,
looking for the ones.
You're in family entertainment, so
yeah,
that's good. But yeah, there's a lot of dystopia at the moment. I'm reading, like, just a world gone to hell, and it's like, that's fun. Yeah.
But is the arc? I guess I'm.
No, there's really no arc. It's just miserable. just miserable. So yeah.
So I feel like so Pollyannish when I go like, I want stories of restoration as opposed to revolution, where you start out in the world and this world is unique and it's somewhat appealing and it's well crafted, and then events in the story, while they're a plot and things are going to go wrong, what's really at risk in the story is that world we saw when we started the movie. Right, and the characters over the course of the movie are going to have to fight like hell to restore what they had before, and obviously have a better and more deep understanding of the value of it.
Writing good characters is hard. Writing characters we connect with is hard. Do you have any advice on how? Is there any way that a writer can kind of start to explore maybe the inner world of their character, or get to know them better, or get them to connect with us?
So we do a lot of, we try to answer that question and we don't have an answer. But if in our attempts to answer it, we do a lot of things, which is to not service the plot at all when we start writing stories. We really just try and put the characters in interesting situations, and often say when we're building a story, and somehow they get to New York. But when they're in New York, she loves Broadway so much that she's going to, now you're suddenly into that. Writers often get bogged down with stopping themselves and going, well, that makes no sense at all. He doesn't have enough money to buy a car. You go, we'll figure that out. We'll get the car, because this event, this moment that involves a car is so revealing of them. So I would write around. I know this sounds like probably terrible advice, but if you have a story and you have a character you want to know, write 5 scenes with that character that occur in that story. Even if they don't occur in that story, your story will find its way to bring those scenes in. But look for scenes that really reveal, and look around your lives for moments that really reveal character. I mean, they're every day. They're happening right, every moment around us.
Yep. All right. I'll throw it open, and before we finish up, does anybody have any questions for Chris while he's here? You say.
You talked about other platforms. I'm wondering what you think about the game platforms, things going the other way. Because right now we see movies and stories going into games and become successful games. But what about a story like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Spider-Man, or is something coming?
It's funny. It's interesting because often the play there is, can we somehow parlay or leverage the equity of the game to grow the audience for the movie? I'm not convinced that works, because I think the experience of playing a game obviously is so different than watching a movie, and it's not just active versus passive. In really, really good games are so etched in the player's mind, and the goals of the game and the involvement in the game. They become almost a hurdle when you try to make a story. Not just the obvious things of like, hey, that character wouldn't have done that in the game, but really you don't have the same relationship, the immediacy and the goal orientation that comes with gameplay. It's very hard to transfer over to a linear script. So I've never been too optimistic about that. Unless you're willing to do what we did on the Lego movie and just threw out any of the dogma around Lego and just create a movie that was inspired by the act of playing with Lego.
You worked on that too. That's right. Yeah. So,
Same vein, a VR. What's your opinion about it?
So my take on VR. VR is two things for us. It's a tool we use to make movies because it's Ready Player One's a movie I worked on 2 years ago, and to scout the scenes for that movie, we scouted them using VR. At the animated movies we do now, we use VR often to do what we call layout, rudimentary animation, because it's just faster than trying to work on a computer. So it's a tool for making movies. As a display platform, it's tough to tell a story in VR. It's a lot of fun to be somewhere, to be experiential. We've all done it. You're on the side of a cliff or something like that. There's a lot of really smart people trying to tell stories in VR. The closest, I think the best expression of a VR story, we're probably not there technologically. I go back to something, do you ever remember, well, I guess Sleep No More, some people is familiar with in New York. Before that, there was a show called Tamara, which was in Hollywood. And before that, there was something called Tony and Tina's Wedding. Anybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah. That was a VR experience, right? Just without the VR. Because you would arrive at this wedding and you were suddenly in a world of the wedding and nobody was blinking and nobody was going to tell you weren't. No one took your tickets. And you just settled into the whole evening and experienced the Long Island wedding. So I don't think we have the technology yet to do sustained, persistent environments where we have multiplayers that are able to interact in real time in a photorealistic way, but we will. And when we do, then I think VR storytelling will take off.
I don't know if I feel good about that or not.
I don't think I'll be around.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay, good. I won't. Anyone else? Sean?
Yeah. When you read a script, say it's a family script, do you know right away it's gonna be animated or half animated? Like say like Alvin and the Chipmunks, where there's real life people and there's animation. How does that work? Do the writers kind of tell you, or do you say no, this is full 3D, or this is mix?
I think if anybody's going to write like Alvin and the Chipmunks, I think that was the pitch originally, was to go out and do that. That's a concept-driven thing. Most writers are writing toward animation, or they're writing toward live action. Sometimes you're looking for, as a producers or as a studio, a hook that might be defined by the approach to the film. So you say, I got just the idea. It's going to be like when we did I'll use a Lego movie as an example. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were on that movie, they kept trying to figure out why am I going to want to see this movie? It's just going to look like the kind of things you can get on Saturday morning television. And they kept coming up and showing me these fan-made films with people had done using little lipstick cameras with Lego, and the look was so incredibly distinct that suddenly we just gravitated toward that aesthetic, and it defined that film. So I don't know that. I think it's rare that you would sit in a room and go, God, should this be live action or animated? I don't know. Usually you're answering that question by what's going to give a hook for the audience, and usually for the marketing of the film.
Is there a difference though in a script? Like if it's an animated film, family film versus a live action family film, are there rules of animation in animated films that there aren't in
They're made in a different way, and if you understand that, you'll take advantage of the strengths of the medium. So in animation, you write a script, and essentially most of the time it's turned over to what we call a story team, story artists. It's a little bit like a writer's room, but they have pencils and they draw pictures. But it's the same thing. They're trying to enhance jokes and trying to make sequences work. So often, probably a less perfect script with more opportunity for visual storytelling is going to make its way through animation than would for a live action film.
Not financially, because I think that would be a more direct answer, but what excites you more creatively? Something that follows the given structure and you know what you're getting, or the things that break the rules, like the gravity or those types of things?
Oh, anybody's going to tell you things that break the rules. I mean, there's wonderful risk there, and when you can engage an audience, with a new set of ideas and characters and conflicts, it's going to always be the way to go. But in the end, I think what I'm always looking for is, can I somehow trick the audience into not seeing the following, and if we can do it through aesthetic, or through the structure of the story, or the originality and invention of the characters. But the ball that I know that certainly the movies I'm working on that I'm always hiding is the following. It's that the characters are going to embark on an external journey. And meanwhile, they're going to have an internal journey, which is seemingly unrelated. character might be trying to get over the death of their father or something. Externally, they're trying to take a river trip down a rafting. And we're going to watch, and seemingly these unrelated journeys are going to find a point of convergence. And when they do, we're going to be rooting for the external journey to be completed so the character's internal journey can be resolved. And we won't know it and see it coming if we do a good job.
Easy.
So just knock one of those out.
Yeah. I just wrote while you were speaking. I just wrote 3 of them. Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you have a preference between doing live action or animated movies?
I don't think so. I think I love the process, and I feel very, very fortunate to be close to it. They're different things. I'm lucky enough to have done both. They're very different, but in the end, they you get to the same place. You get to one day sit down and the lights go off in the theater, usually with a test audience, and you're so, oh my God, terrified. And then the lights come up, and hopefully you cross your fingers you've done something people will remember.
With the recommendation for emerging screenwriters to potentially explore other platforms other than features, I guess the question I would ask is, what kind of goal should we realistically be expecting through that? Like, so for like with a pilot, would it be representation, or would it be to get it in front of a producer, to be a showrunner, or get on our writing team?
Wow, those are all good goals. I think any one of the above. I think it's, on the one hand, it's terrifying to go out and just cold start to write. I think the advice that's often been given, if you're going to write for television and write a spec script, don't write a spec script for This Is Us. They don't need your spec scripts, right? Go find a show that's barely staying on the air and write them a killer script. They'll take your phone call. I think when I'm talking about it, and that doesn't mean one shouldn't be writing the specs feature film script. That's, but the odds on that are low. So just like have a portfolio, right? Do write that, but at the same time, look around for the television show that needs you, or look around for, if it's, and I think the media all the way down to YouTube. Obviously the emerging platforms like Netflix and other streaming services. I would just be trying to write specialized material for those sorts of markets. What's the end goal? The end goal, of course, is to find a group of people that are like-minded and are writing great stuff and are willing to pay you to be part of them. And I think that is a goal you can find in a number of places.
But how do you get noticed nowadays? What's the way? Because query letters are dead. How does someone who may not have a whole bunch of track record get someone like you to read their script?
Well, in all fairness, tonight I got to see 2 different writers. It is. There's a ground game that you have to play. I think there's a lot of these kinds. There aren't a lot of these kinds of opportunities.
There are none.
Yeah, there are none. I was going to say.
That's why everyone should come.
It is a great opportunity. This sounds sort of crazy and Pollyannish, but mounting a small play, shooting a bit of dialogue, doing something to get attention. There is a marketing component to this. It's hard because as writers, I think, and I just did some writing, though I was never that good, but it's hard not to want to be loved, and what you really want to do is get some leverage. And it's a tough trade-off, and leverage comes by doing something that someone else is going to find appealing and want. If you shoot a single one-woman show up here with a compelling character, right? Get that scene, get it on YouTube, get it sent. Eventually someone calls me and goes, "Have you seen this crazy woman on YouTube?" That is increasingly how we're finding people. Of course, agencies have representation; they submit, and we have a list of highly paid writers that we will be looking for. But much more frequently in the past, I get sent tapes or small one-act scenes or a little episode of a animated Saturday morning cartoon that has a certain edge and quality to it, and it's often those are people we call to bring in, see if there's something to talk about.
Right, I have 2 more quick ones. One, what's the project that's exciting you most right now?
We have a big movie opening in a month, an animated movie, which is How to Train Your Dragon. the third, the completion of the trilogy, and we completed it, and it's a gorgeous movie. It's beautiful, it's moving. There's no way you don't cry at the end of it. It's fantastic.
All right, last question. Who, you mentioned Tara working with demanding directors. Who? Who was the...
He's got a camera on. I have worked with excellent directors.
Okay, without mentioning any names, what would be the definition of a demanding director?
No, no. Kidding aside, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really great directors.
Yeah. But when they're a challenge, how are they? Are they like, I need to have this done, and you're like, this can't be done? You're like, I don't want to hear that, or is it a different? What's the dynamic that is challenging when in your job?
That was pretty good.
Oh, yeah?
I need to get this. It's no one ever. I don't think it's very hard to work with someone who is tirelessly pursuing a singular vision for a movie. That's not the hard part is working with people that don't have a vision for a movie. That's when you really are struggling. And but I've been lucky enough to work with people with tremendous vision for stories sometimes. With George Miller on Fury Road, there was a problem with. We were supposed to shoot that movie in Australia, and where we shot the first one, and there was a problem that year. They had rain, and so it looked like Ireland, right? And they're trying to go shoot
too many flowers,
Mad Max, and so he just said, we found a place to shoot it. And we go, wow, fantastic. Where's that? He goes, Namibia, which is on the west coast of Africa, just below Botswana, and it takes 36 hours to get there from here, of continuous travel. And the first time I traveled all the way there to Namibia to visit George and talk about what was going on the set, it was like there was a problem on the set. You got to go to the set. I go, okay, that's incredible. You fly to London, fly to South Africa, fly to Walvis Bay, take a 2-hour car out into the middle of the desert. When I get all the way out there, and there's nothing there in this incredible desert, you come all the way down, and I go, where's the camera? And we come all the way down into this massive thing of cars and trucks and tents, and you get down there, and there's George with a camera shooting a guy with a green screen behind him this big. So the first word I ever said to George in Namibia was, I could have shot that in my garage. But that's not. But that was all he. I mean, that's a man. That is a man with a vision.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, that actually leads me to now my very final question. I promise. Up-and-coming writers get a lot of feedback, and a lot of, like even tonight, and a lot of different opinions from, and certainly an agent will give you a different opinion, often from a manager, from a producer, and you're talking about people with singular vision and how but then sometimes their script is shit, and it's like it needs help or it needs to get work. So do you have any advice on when to hold fast and when to not?
Okay, what would it be?
You know?
It's the cute answer is hold fast when it's a good idea.
Right.
No, I don't mean a vision that we're talking about directors there.
Yes, I know.
And I think it's different than writers. I think writers are often going to be in service of a director and in service of all the other. They're the first. They're where the movie starts, right? And it's in its purest form the day it comes off out of the printer, and from that point on, it's a series of compromises and a series of moving to try and bring other people in, because the script on itself is not going to be alive unless other people come, and they're going to have impact on it. I don't think, well, with a rare exception, I don't know that being it's tough to say. I wouldn't recommend being a writer that's unbending. I think what you want to be is a writer that understands what the core thing that brought you into the script was, what the single idea, whether it's a theme or whether it's an aspect of a character that gave you access into it, and then be willing to say to somebody, where you're going with this is away from that idea. And I, because I wrote it, can tell you that there's disasters ahead. It's not going to work, right? That's the thing to hold on to. Sometimes you run into, you don't want to be the person that holds on to something that doesn't really have in it its core DNA of the project.
All right, and with that, I'll let you all go home. Chris DeFaria, everyone.